South Africa today bid farewell to much-loved global human rights and peace icon Ahmed Kathrada. The ANC struggle icon died at a Johannesburg hospital at the age of 87. Kathrada was laid to rest early at the West Park Cemetery. But how should a leader of the sterling caliber be remembered and this part of our rich liberation history preserved for generations to come? Well, Nicolas Wolpe is the Executive Director of the Liliesleaf Trust, and he joins us now on the desk. Good afternoon, Nicolas. And thank you for making time for us at the SABC News Desk.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Ahmed Kathrada being called selfless, humble, incorruptible. How are you planning on remembering a leader of such caliber?
Well, I think one must not look about today. It's about going forward. It is about preserving the memory of the individual, the spirit of what that individual highlighted and stood for. Yes. And you saw that in at the funeral today, as you mentioned, selfless sacrifice, dedicated, committed, uncorruptible, modest. These are the true essences of the stalwarts of the liberation struggle. And Liliesleaf epitomizes that. It tries to ensure that the story of those great liberation struggle stalwarts are kept alive, that the memory of those individuals is not lost. Because again, I'd like to come back to the whole question of the memory against forgetting. We tend to memorialize so many of our struggle stalwarts in this country. But the problem is people don't know what they stood for. They don't know what the role they played and their contribution. So that's one of the important facets of Liliesleaf.
Just on that point, Nicolas, sadly there are still many South Africans who don't know or are not familiar with Liliesleaf, the role and its significance. Just give us some historical perspective on the farm and why the arrest of Kathrada and others was pivotal in shaping an international response to apartheid at that time.
Well, Liliesleaf was purchased in August of 1961, and it was purchased at a time of immense turmoil. It was a period following Sharpeville where the apartheid regime clamped down mercilessly and viciously on all forms of opposition. The ANC was banned, POPCO was banned, the PAC was banned. The liberation movement effectively went underground. Sharpeville was a defining moment because it pushed the ANC away solely from passive resistance to a combination of passive resistance and armed struggle. The purchase of Liliesleaf coincided with the decision to move away. Liliesleaf became the nerve center of the liberation movement, the high command. It was where they met. It was where they engaged and discussed the overthrow of the apartheid regime. It was where Kathy stayed. It was where, as he said, the thatched cottage was our home, was our meeting place. It was where they lived and took refuge. Liliesleaf became, as I mentioned, the nerve center, and the raid on Liliesleaf had a fundamental impact in that it led to two things. Firstly, it led to effectively the destruction of the internal liberation movement, and secondly, to the Rivonia trial. And the Rivonia trial in itself was fundamental because on the one hand, apart from them at the time looking at the possible death sentence, which in itself was a critical issue, it provided them with a platform to articulate to the world what the struggle was about. It was an opportunity for them to break free of the shackles of press censorship that had been imposed upon South Africa by the apartheid regime, and they had this ability to now convey to the world, and through that conveying of their struggle, it changed the mindset, I believe, of the international community. The United Nations condemned the trial, so it propelled the liberation movement onto the international agenda.
How difficult is it to get the younger generation to the center right now? Are you seeing the numbers of locals and tourists that you would like to?
We're not. Again, this is one of the problems about the memory against forgetting. We do have a problem in this country. And today, which is an important day to remember such a great liberation icon and stalwart, must be maintained. One of the problems is we tend to fizzle out after a couple of days. We must keep that momentum going. We must not allow South Africans to forget that people like Ahmed Kathrada, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, who were true icons and leaders of the liberation movement and personified the true values of what our struggle was about and what the ANC represented. And you heard that today at the funeral, all of them talking about the true values that Kathy represented and others like him, like J.B. Marks, Wilton McQuire, Moses Katana. These are important names, and these names must be preserved.
You have a candle lighting ceremony at the centre coming up this weekend. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, on Saturday from 11 o'clock, we're opening up Liliesleaf for people who'd like to come and light a candle and place it outside of a thatched cottage where Ahmed Kathrada and 5 others were arrested. It's a way of them paying tribute to him and remembering this great icon of our struggle.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on the SABC News Desk, Nicholas. That was Nicolas Wolpe, the CEO of the Liliesleaf Trust, joining us here on the SABC News Desk.